Alrighty, everyone, welcome back to another live stream here on the channel. Hopefully everyone is having a great Thursday so far. Glad to see everybody in here for another live stream. We've got Jake, Legacy, Proxy, Tracy, Justin, Fan, Cody, and everyone else who's in the chat who I may have forgotten to welcome, or if you're just not chatting and just watching but not chatting, glad to have you here. Jonathan and Indiana as well. Hopefully everyone is having, like I said, a great Thursday so far. Welcome, Jefferson, Alt. Glad to see you in here. All right, let me just make sure everything's good. I think we are good to go. We'll see about this scene right here. Looks good enough. For once, didn't forget that level threat like I did yesterday there. So this is going to be probably a relatively quick live stream here, just discussing the potential for severe weather for tomorrow, as we do have a very large enhanced risk for severe weather out, just like what we had yesterday, but now we have those probabilities to take a look at, and some higher resolution model runs to take a look at, as well as the new 18Z HRRR currently rendering in right now for late tonight, and that's going to be rendering in into tomorrow's severe weather threat as well. We also just got a severe watch out there in Missouri and Arkansas for today, so severe weather is also possible today. We'll go over that and also go over the tornado threat, and just generally go over what you could expect today and into tomorrow morning before we have our next live stream, which will probably be much of the day tomorrow. All right, let's go ahead and dive on into this. We'll start with today, since that is the more imminent threat here. We'll go ahead and refresh this. So we just got a severe thunderstorm watch out here in this pink area across southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, into far southwest Illinois and western Kentucky. This actually did uptrend overnight, so they've actually added a slight risk for severe weather. Yesterday, this was only a level 1. They've now added a level 2 risk for some isolated large hail, potentially even up to 2.75-inch hail today across Arkansas and southern Missouri. So definitely stay weather aware if you are out there across this yellow area. We can't rule out a spin-up tornado, but the main threat is definitely by far large hail followed by damaging winds. And then I wouldn't rule out, like I said, just a spin-up tornado with one of these storms that may be able to spin, it's sometime today. But that tornado threat, very, very low. Then we have our severe weather risk up here back in New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire. Tornado threat is a 5%, so they did upgrade that. They didn't add a hatched risk like I thought they would. Instead of adding a hatched risk, what they did is they ended up actually increasing the tornado risk from 2% to 5%, which, gotta be honest, I really don't think today's worth a 5%. but the SPC does, so they added that. Also a 15% damaging wind risk and 15% hail risk, so could see 1.5 inch hail, 50 to 65 mile an hour wind gust, and a brief tornado or two up there in New York. Just make sure you're weather aware. I don't think it'll be anything too crazy, but definitely something that you want to keep an eye on, and make sure you're keeping your eyes on the sky if you are out here across that yellow risk area in New York. Elsewhere, we have a conditional risk for some large hail, upwards of 2 inches in diameter across Texas. Very conditional risk. The best chance for severe weather across this conditional risk is southern Texas, right near Del Rio, where we had those severe storms yesterday. It's a very low risk and very, very conditional. So, yeah. Elsewhere, we just have the remnant of that level 1, but the main area is that level 2 there and that level 2 there, both in those yellow areas, and then that conditional large hail risk back towards Del Rio, Texas. All this marginal in here, I don't expect much, just maybe some isolated thunderstorms of 50, 60 mile an hour winds and maybe 1 inch hail. Nothing too significant if you're in that portion of our level 1 out of 5 for severe weather today. And then we could go ahead and just talk about tomorrow here on the SPC outlook. You could see they've extended that enhanced risk even more into Oklahoma. They've extended that enhanced risk closer to St. Louis, more into central Illinois, and way more into Wisconsin, with that slight risk now going into northern Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan. So big expansions there on that enhanced risk, and that slight risk also got expanded all the way into northern Indiana, southwestern Michigan. So definitely some big expansions there over the last two outlook updates ever since we were live yesterday. For yesterday's severe threat, also talking about this threat here. And yesterday we did have quite a few spin up weak tornadoes. There was 2 notable debris signatures. We had a decent debris signature out here in Clinton, Missouri, and then also a decent debris signature, an unwarned possible strong tornado in western Arkansas. We had a couple spin up weak tornadoes yesterday. So yesterday, so far, they've only actually confirmed 2 tornadoes from yesterday, but I think they're going to be able to find multiple more tornadoes, most in Arkansas, but also a lot probably on the border of Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin. We had quite the severe weather threat right in here last night, and then right down in here last night. And then we did have, again, that one random SIG tour in central Missouri yesterday afternoon and evening. So severe threat was a little bit higher yesterday than what I expected. But I didn't go back live because that risk was so spaced out. We really didn't have like a continuous severe weather threat with that embedded tornado risk yesterday. The tornado risk, there was a few tornadoes right after we ended random SIG tour in the middle of the afternoon, and then a bunch of tornadoes started spinning up closer towards 10, 11 o'clock, and there was even still warnings at midnight 12:30. So a lot of that severe weather was very much spaced out yesterday. Tomorrow won't really be the same case as yesterday in terms of the tornado threat. The tornado threat is going to be way more widespread than yesterday, all the way from northern Wisconsin. If we take a look at our tornado risk, northern Wisconsin all the way down through eastern Minnesota, eastern Iowa, even into western Oklahoma under the gun for tornadoes tomorrow. So a way more widespread area for severe weather under the gun for tornadoes tomorrow compared to yesterday. And we also have our, I believe, our first ever SIG-2 5% tornado risk for our day 2 outlook. And I think this might be our first ever 10% SIG-2 tornado risk for the day 2 outlook as well. So we're looking at a very notable tornado threat possible here across Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois. And I do think that SIG-2 could be expanded all the way back up here into central Wisconsin, as well as that 10% expanded into central Wisconsin. And I also believe we could see a secondary 10% SIG-1. I don't think this one would be SIG-2, but we could see a SIG-1 10% added back out here in Kansas and Oklahoma if our threat increases, with the chance of cluster to semi-discrete cells embedded in a QLCS out there for the evening hours tomorrow and into the overnight hours. Moderate risk is kind of 50-50 tomorrow for tornadoes. I don't believe it's needed still at the moment. There's definitely quite a lot of questions regarding moisture, cloud cover, and also, what's the last one? Oh, yeah, storm mode. Storm mode. So definitely still quite a few questions regarding the severe weather threat, or rather the tornado threat tomorrow. I am a little bit more uncertain about that notable tornado threat for tomorrow's severe weather threat. But even if we don't see this widespread of a tornado threat, which I think we will see a widespread tornado threat, I'm just a bit more questioning on the intense tornado threat portion of it. Even if that tornado threat doesn't end up performing, we still have a very large risk for damaging winds, widespread damaging winds upwards of 80, maybe even pushing 85 miles per hour will be possible tomorrow. And then large hail also could be a very big issue as well. We could see a SIG 2 added in either one of these areas, if not maybe even both of these areas. We could see a SIG 2 hail risk added all the way from Wisconsin back into Illinois and Iowa, and then maybe another SIG 2 added for hail in Oklahoma and Kansas tomorrow, because I do think we have the opportunity for large hail, even upwards of 3.5, 4 inches in diameter with any semi-discrete storms that fire ahead of the QLCS, or just as storms fire, they could be semi-discrete to clustered, promoting more of that hail threat initially before they grow upscale. So overall for tomorrow, we've got a very large level 1 out of 5, level 2 out of 5, and level 3 out of 5 for severe weather, with a potential for a level 4 out of 5 moderate risk to be added tomorrow. Anywhere really in that orange area. The most likely area I see for a moderate at this given moment is back up here from western Illinois into northern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, for the potential of those prefrontal supercells and maybe destructive large hail. But honestly, we could even see a moderate back down here into Kansas and Oklahoma and Missouri. It just depends how things trend tomorrow morning. They definitely won't be adding a moderate risk for our day 2 outlook. That already got issued. We had our day 2 morning outlook, and our day 2 afternoon outlook was issued roughly just a little bit under 2 hours ago, 1:30 Eastern. I believe that was issued for our day 2 afternoon outlook. So no day 2 moderate risk, but I do think there's an opportunity for a day 1 moderate risk pending on model run trends. So, but regardless, just like the other day, just like Tuesday, we didn't get that moderate risk for severe weather, and the community was shocked, and people started downplaying the risk once storms started to form. Don't make that same mistake. If you made it once, don't make it again. If we don't get a moderate risk, that doesn't mean tomorrow won't be very significant. Whether we stay enhanced or go moderate risk, either way, we're looking at a very significant risk for tornadoes tomorrow. And I don't want you to get too caught up in that categorical risk. So we're getting our new 18Z HRRR right now. It is out till 7 a.m. Friday morning. That's tomorrow morning. We definitely are going to be able to see that here for sure in this live stream. But if we just go back to our little bit older model run here, this is definitely a little bit fast with our cold front. Some models, most of our other models aren't really hinting towards our cold front being as fast as like what the HRRR has. So I don't know if it's going to be as fast as the HRRR, and I also think the HRRR may be overdoing the environment in northern Wisconsin. So we'll have to see how fast that cold front actually is, and we'll have to see how far north that very favorable environment actually gets. I have a feeling the HRRR is a little bit too quick with the cold front and a little bit too far north with that volatile environment. This is a high-risk worthy event right here. This environment is high risk worthy, no doubt would be a 30 sig 2 if we actually had that environment with a favorable storm mode. But that's the big thing. We're not going to be seeing a favorable storm mode tomorrow. We're looking at very sloppy, clustered, severe storms tomorrow. We're not looking at semi-discrete supercells moving into that volatile environment and producing intense to violent tornadoes. These storms will still be capable of producing strong to intense tornadoes tomorrow in that volatile environment, roughly from west central Wisconsin, or rather west central Illinois, eastern Iowa, all the way up into central western Wisconsin, and maybe even in extreme southeastern Minnesota. So, like I said, high risk environment, but when you look at other things, especially looking at that precipitation, the storm mode definitely by no means favors a high risk for tomorrow. And like I said, we could see an upgrade to a moderate, depending on maybe if we trend a little bit less clustered, and if we see that cold front slow down a little bit more. Our high end is definitely a moderate tomorrow. I don't see a high risk being a possibility for tomorrow's event. And like I said, I do think the HRRR is overdoing how far north that environment is. I don't think we'll see that volatile environment all the way up here into far northern Wisconsin. We'll probably see it into central Wisconsin, but I don't think we'll see it all the way up until, far northern Wisconsin, very close to the upper peninsula of Michigan. I don't think that environment will be volatile that far to the north. The NAM 3K kind of shows what I'm thinking here. That volatile environment, not as far to the north, but still pretty dang far north on the NAM 3K here. And you can see that very favorable environment actually extends along the entirety of the cold front, with that volatile environment limited to back here in central Wisconsin, eastern Iowa. But a really good favorable environment across the board here on the NAM 3K model run at 4 tomorrow. And let's see how that firestorms. It looks like we're really expecting some prefrontal convection here across western Illinois and southern Wisconsin ahead of the cold front. And depending on how messy that is, that would probably be one of our higher end tornado threats for tomorrow. Our higher end tornado threat tomorrow is going to be focused with that volatile environment in central Wisconsin, back down to where those prefrontals are located in western northwest Illinois. That's going to be our main tornado threat tomorrow from what I've seen. But like I said, I wouldn't rule out a 10% SIG 1, not a SIG 2, 10% SIG 1 for a few strong tornadoes being possible back out here in Kansas and Oklahoma. Even honestly, even if storms go upscale rapidly out there, we could still be looking at a 10 SIG tornado risk tomorrow across Kansas, just associated with that QLCS threat right along the cold front. And you can see you actually do end up with some very much prefrontal slop fest here in front of your main cold front that extends roughly out in here is where your cold front's at. So you actually get two areas of primary prefrontal activity there on the 12Z HRRR. New HRRR is going out right now to 13Z. Curious to see if we see any notable trends there. You could see right off the bat, I don't see anything too extremely noticeable. The cold front may be the taddest bit slower, and moisture may be the taddest bit better on the 18Z HRRR compared to the old 12Z HRRR. So maybe a bit more of a volatile environment coming in here on the new HRRR. Yes, tomorrow is a 10% SIG 2 tour already, but I was talking about a 10% SIG 1 tornado risk back down here in Kansas and Oklahoma. This 10% SIG 2, I think that SIG 2 is going to be extended into central Wisconsin. And like I said, we could even see a 15% hatched corridor added, and in that case, that would upgrade to a categorical risk of a moderate 4 out of 5 if confidence increases in the risk for tornadoes tomorrow. So just like just like Tuesday's scenario, Tuesday, the same areas, some of the same areas that were under a 10% SIG 2 risk on Tuesday are under a 10% SIG 2 risk right now. Where we had that intense tornado on Tuesday, I believe, where is it? It's somewhere up here. Might be a little bit too far west. I know it was somewhere right in here. Aha, there it is. Yep, where we had that intense tornado in Union Center, Wisconsin, where we had that on Tuesday, those same people that got impacted by that intense low-end EF3 tornado that the NWS rated out here is under a 10% SIG 2 risk. So same areas impacted on Tuesday will be impacted tomorrow, Friday, for the same potential of an intense tornado being possible and strong tornadoes being likely. All right, let's see if our 18Z has anything firing yet. Right off the bat, that's going to be a big problem for your warm sector. You've already got an overconvected slop fest starting at noon. This is 12 p.m. Eastern. And you already got an overconvected slop fest starting ahead of your cold front. Which you can see the 12Z did not have that. The 12Z did have some convection on the southern side, but it really just had that chance for prefrontals right in here. This is all prefrontals, by the way. If you didn't notice that from the 12Z, that's all prefrontal stuff right there. And we'll see if the 18ZH has the same thing, but it also shows that crap vection, which could hurt the warm sector. That could use up the environment before the main stuff fires. Is it true that a multiple vortex happened in a general thunderstorm risk? I don't know. I didn't hear anything about it. I didn't hear anything about that. Depends what day you're talking about. At some point in Earth's lifespan, I'm sure that's happened. But yeah, yesterday, the main thing yesterday, we had that potential SIG tour in Clinton, Missouri. We had that regional potential outbreak in southern Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, and northern Illinois right around sunset. And then after dark, we had that little area that popped off with an unwarned significant tornado in western Arkansas. So yesterday definitely was a very notable severe weather outbreak and probably a borderline tornado outbreak. Another frame on our HRRR. It still has overconvection in the open warm sector, but that overconvection is fairly weak. And so it's not really hurting the environment too much, but you could see where that convection is. You have 2,300 Cape, and then just behind that, you have 2,600, and then well west of that, you have 3,000, 3,400 out here. So that definitely could be something that plays into tomorrow. Tomorrow is by no means a guaranteed tornado outbreak. There's multiple things to watch. I'll go back to the 12Z. We got to watch that potential overconvection issue in the early afternoon here across the open warm sector. We have to watch for the potential of a full-blown messy mode along our main tornado threats tomorrow. We got to watch for the potential for overconvection in front of our cold front back down here in Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma. We're going to have to watch for a potential moisture issue across western Illinois, eastern Iowa. That could create very high temperatures and not the best dew points, which would lead to elevated thunderstorms. You're looking at 60 dews and 85 temps. That is a very elevated environment that would not be favorable for tornadoes. Now, you could still see a tornado or two there, but if that is the case with the lack of moisture, the risk for a strong tornado is definitely much lower, as if your dew points were up into the upper 60s and low 70s. So I could see overconvection is probably going to be a huge issue tomorrow. We could see also overconvection in the open warm sector. We could see a lack of moisture. We could see temperatures go too high that results in elevated thunderstorms. We could see prefrontals that overconvect the open warm sector. There's plenty of underperformance and bust modes for tomorrow's tornado threat. But no matter what, severe weather is nearly a guarantee. And right now, severe weather is expected for tomorrow. So that tornado, like I said, a tornado outbreak is not a guarantee tomorrow by any means, but a damaging wind threat, very high, and that is likely going to perform quite well. And the hail threat is also more certain than that tornado threat. So tornado threat definitely has a really good probability to be a problem, but the problem is there's a lot of uncertainty with it, which is why they didn't pull that day 2 moderate, which I completely agree with. I didn't read their discussion. If anybody did they mention a potential categorical risk upgrade tomorrow? Conditional tornado probabilities have been increased to further indicate strong tornado potential. A volatile environment will develop near and ahead of the cold front Friday afternoon with significant severe hail, wind, and several tornadoes expected. That's in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. Several tornadoes expected. That is definitely 10 sig wording right there. I'm not too sure why it's still at 5 sig then. That is several tornadoes expected is for sure 10 sig tor wording. Not sure why they kept it 5% with that type of wording. That type of wording, very, very strong. go to our 12Z HRRR again. I know we will have a volatile environment tomorrow night, right along our cold front dry line. And if anything can initiate there, that could be a giant issue. But you could see nothing actually initiates along that dry line and cold front in southwest Oklahoma. And nothing, I don't think anything really shows that initiating. It shouldn't initiate there. But I just wanted to point that out just in case. You never know, that could become a problem in the future. And then you could see the big difference between the NAM and the HRRR here is that the NAM doesn't have that overconvection in front of the cold front. And that is why the NAM 3K has a more volatile environment in this area, whereas the HRRR 12Z had overconvection prefrontals firing, and thus your environment never really got to that volatile environment that the NWS is talking about, or that the SPC is talking about down here in this region. HRRR is a little bit frozen, so you know what we're going to do? We're going to switch to Weatherwise, and we're going to get this thing early. Let's go ahead and pull this on out on Weatherwise. This already goes out through much of the outbreak thread on Weatherwise. So this is going to be 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and you can see there's that prefrontal slop in southwestern Wisconsin. There's your other prefrontal threat right in here. 3 o'clock, you continue to see an increase in that prefrontal threat across western Wisconsin. Still a bit of a sloppy storm in southern Wisconsin. 4 o'clock, you start to see your prefrontals fire out here across eastern Iowa, western Illinois. And also, this HRRR1 also has prefrontals firing in Kansas and northern Oklahoma, just like the 12Z HRRR. And then this is the second to last frame here on our current rendered in 18Z HRRR. And you could see everything is overconvected. It's just a complete and utter slop fest catastrophe out here in Wisconsin, Illinois, and then a slop fest out here in Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, with that main line trying to form behind that slop fest. But because you already have supercells in the open warm sector taking up that environment, that line just starts to die out as it moves into that already used environment. So you just end up with an overall very sloppy severe weather outbreak tomorrow on the 18Z HRRR. I did notice that this cell here, Wisconsin, was quite discreet for a while on this model run. So that is something to note. And it still looks like it kept your quite volatile environment here. Still kept your quite volatile environment across Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. And then again, your volatile environment tries to form back here near your cold front. But because of this overconvection prefrontal mess, that stops a volatile environment from really being a problem out here in Kansas on the new HRRR. We'll see this on College Due page 2. Just taking a bit longer on College Due page. You can already see by 2 o'clock. By 2 o'clock, you are at a volatile environment here. Already starting to get some, 17, 16, 17 supercell composite here. That is very, very high numbers. That is very, very high numbers. Very big problems. And that's right on that discrete supercell, too. So that would cause some really big problems. If that actually does come to fruition. So, yeah, like I said, tomorrow's environment across Wisconsin is literally high-risk caliber. But that storm mode, I have a very good feeling, is probably going to keep this from going moderate for Tor. Because, I mean, you are just at potentially the most volatile environment of the year possible up here. on in Wisconsin on this new model run. I mean, nitpicking it, your supercell composite is at almost 12 along some of those storms. So very, very volatile environment, like I said. But very much over-convected. Very, very much over-convected. But if anything becomes well-maintained across that open warm sector in Wisconsin, anything becomes discrete, semi-discrete, or shoot, even if it's clustered, but especially if it's discrete to semi-discrete, we definitely could see a few intense EF3 plus tornadoes tomorrow, even if we are at a bit more of a sloppy mode. This is looking at the 15Z wrap model run, zooming out here. This is the trough that's causing our problem. You could see a absolute monster amount of defluence aloft here that's going to help create just a slop fest of thunderstorms in front of our low and on our low. See, the wrap model here doesn't have a problem with moisture. If you actually do get up to, 68 degrees for your dew points in eastern Iowa, that is for sure an example where we would see a moderate risk for tornadoes right there. That would definitely be more of a better chance at a moderate risk if we actually do see that high amount of dew points. And I wonder if the 18ZH nope, 18Z still hasn't changed. And I want to say it's almost safe to call the HRRR an outlier. Because look at all the runs. So the HRRR says upper 50s, low 60s across this particular area on the 18Z and very close to on the 12Z as well. The wrap says almost low 70s out here. Actually, yeah, you are at 70 degree dew points right there. The NAM says mid 60s. The NAM 3K says mid to upper 60s. The GFS, a global model for what it's worth, not as accurate when you're this close. That's also upper 60s. The Euro, mid 60s. The low-res Canadian, mid 60s. The high-res Canadian, right on board with that, mid 60s. And then I do want to check the RRFSA as well. 12Z. So, if this also shows mid-60s, I think it's pretty safe to say we could throw the HRRR out. Yeah. I think it's safe to say we could toss the HRRR in the garbage can. I think we could toss the HRRR in the garbage can in terms of just what it's showing. Now, I still do believe a slop fest is likely, but maybe not as big of a slop fest as what the HRRR is portraying. Like, I don't think we'll see this big of a slop fest tomorrow. The NAM 3K is kind of a better scenario here. In terms, not better, more realistic scenario, in my opinion, where we have that cold front initiating a large line of QLCS spin-up tornadoes, and then prefrontals here, a bit sloppy in southern Wisconsin, western Illinois. And then we could also have the risk for some prefrontals in Wisconsin. And then we'll have to see about back down here into Kansas and Oklahoma. I'm not too sure about that area for prefrontals. The wrap seems pretty dang confident in just precipitation across that area. I would like to go ahead and spot on the RRFSA again here. Go ahead and put this back on and see if this has overconvection across Kansas and Oklahoma. I mean, it definitely has prefrontals, that's for sure, but I wouldn't necessarily call it complete and utter overconvection of the warm sector. Definitely more of a slop fest back up here in Illinois, southern Wisconsin, northeastern Missouri. Big slop fest on the RRFSA up there. And then you can also see not as intense of storms into far northern Wisconsin on the RRFSA. So I still think there's quite a bit more to work out here, which is why the SBC didn't pull that moderate risk trigger. Which, like I said, was a very, very good idea to withhold that at the moment. But point being is we're going to have multiple areas with a potentially volatile environment. And if storms can fire in that volatile environment, especially back up in that 10% tornado risk area outlined by the Storm Prediction Center, we'll have the potential for EF3 tornadoes tomorrow. Like I said, I do think that 10%, the northern side of that 10% could also get upgraded to a 10% SIG 2. I don't really know why they didn't increase that, pull that SIG 2 further to the north, but yeah, because, I mean, every model that shows a volatile environment in southern Wisconsin is showing relatively the same thing for central and northern Wisconsin. The NAM, the NAM3K, the RAP, the HRRR. I mean, really any model run that shows the southern portion of Wisconsin being in a volatile environment down in here shows that volatile environment into northern Wisconsin. Oh no, overconvection will be an issue. You'll have forcing across the open warm sector through much of the afternoon. This is going to be your shortwave that initiates overconvection issues across southern Wisconsin and northwestern Illinois and eastern Iowa. Potential prefrontals at 3 p.m. Eastern. And then you have a bigger shortwave with your trough back down in here. That's going to be where your cold fronts... That's what's going to help your cold front push through. You can see your cold front right there, ahead of that 700 millibar trough. And you'll have multiple little short waves embedded inside of this flow here. Multiple short waves embedded inside of this flow. But that main short wave is almost a guarantee. Almost a guarantee on that main short wave around 3 p.m. Less of a guarantee for short waves later in the day. Ahead of that cold front, there may not be as much forcing in front of the cold front out here in Oklahoma and Kansas. We'll have to see about the potential for short waves into northern Wisconsin. That's what maybe the HRRR is picking up on. And then, like I said there, your main cold front is pretty well in front of that 700 millibar trough. More evidence on a slop fest than not. Yet we are still being bullish. What do you mean bullish? Bullish is calling for a high risk. Even with a slop fest, we are definitely at high-end enhanced, maybe pushing low-end moderate. Bullish would be starting to call for a high risk, being a likelihood tomorrow. Like I said, your environment is very much a high-risk caliber environment out here. But with how much strong evidence we have for a slop fest being possible, like I said, it's definitely nowhere close to likely that we'll see a high risk. I do think if we maybe clear up a little bit on this slop fest, we could see a low and moderate issue to 15 sig tour, 15 sig 2 tour. But that's if it looks a little less likely to see all this extra slop. And we just have, our prefrontals here and then our cold front here. So if you just have like your prefrontal threat off that 700 millibar shortwave in front of the cold front, and then you have your cold front right back here, and you remove that slop fest in the middle, that is a scenario where I could see a moderate risk being possible. But we'll have to see which way things trend there. And then, again, more uncertain there on the threat for prefrontals down in here. Big question mark on if we'll have a 700 millibar shortwave to initiate any prefrontal stuff on that. The HRRR is pretty close to on its own with that. The wrap kind of hints at that potential for prefrontals. Definitely hints at the idea of prefrontals there and being overconvected. The NAM 3K definitely doesn't. The GFS actually kind of hints on that too, with the light rain being there. So we'll see. We shall see. High risk is not anywhere on the table due to the jet translation speed. Well, I would like to see you actually calculate that for the 700 millibar shortwave embedded here in South Dakota and Nebraska tomorrow morning, and see where that ends up across Wisconsin, and see if that meets near a high risk, because you're not going to be looking at the jet translation speed of the main trough, the main positively tilted trough. You're looking at the translation speed of the negatively tilted trough on the northeast side of the Four Corners coming off of the Rockies tomorrow morning, and where that goes correlated to where it goes here across Wisconsin and Illinois. But even then, if it even hits, if that is fast enough to hit the potential for a high risk, like I said, they're definitely not. We're not going to be looking at that high end of a risk, because the threat for overconvection of the open warm sector, it's just not going to warrant enough confidence. Like I said, a low end moderate, that's pushing it. A low end moderate risk is pushing it. Let's see here. Strong tornado potential is evident Friday afternoon and early evening, especially from Iowa into southern Wisconsin and northwestern Illinois. While convection evolution is a bit uncertain, there is good agreement on a very unstable environment with mid-level lapse rates to 8.5. Let's see. Along with 200 to 300 effective SRH ahead of the surface low and near the warm front. While an eventual squall line may take shape late in the day, scattered supercells appear likely after about 19Z, 3 p.m. Eastern, ahead of the developing low as dew points rise rapidly. Conditional tornado probabilities have thus been increased further to indicate stronger tornado potential. And like I said, they do mention a volatile environment across Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, yet they didn't upgrade to a 10% SIG 1 down there. Yeah. 10 hatched isn't saying SIG 2. It's just meaning a 10% any SIG. And no, you could still call it 10 hatched. You could still call it a hatched risk, because it's got hatching. You could still call it hatched. I could still call this 5 hatched and 10 hatched. But if you do call it 10 hatched and you have a SIG 1 and a SIG 2 inside that 10 hatched, you definitely want to clarify which is which. For instance, just in case you don't know, this hatching here that you see on the tail end of that southern 10% tornado risk, that is where we have the potential for EF3 tornadoes. Whereas on the northern side of that, you could see how we have the same hatching up here in Wisconsin as we do here in Kansas and Oklahoma. So everywhere in that hatching is for the potential of EF2 tornadoes. The only chance for EF3 tornadoes that the SPC has outlined is right here. That's the thing, the SPC outlooks, this is the only outlook that most public people see. The general public, normally on your meteorologists' TV stations, on your weather apps, most of the time, this is what you're going to see. The SPC, the torr, wind, and hail probabilities, those are more for us enthusiasts and meteorologists behind the scenes. It's not as common to see those portrayed on a nationwide scale for like a nationwide TV network to show those probabilities. That's why the Weather Channel has Torcon, which makes it more simple. So the SPC is, aside from the categorical risk, the probabilities of the SPC is not directed towards the general public. It is actually directed towards broadcast meteorologists, as well as public services out there, like, for instance, emergency management offices and ham operators, that stuff. First responders, not geared towards the general public. The only one that is generally geared towards the general public is the categorical risk outlook, which really didn't get, it. We did kind of see with the SIG change, moderate for like wind is a little bit easier because wind verifies a lot more now than when it did with the SIG risk, from last year. Wind verifies a lot more than previously thought, and that's why they added upwards to a 90% wind with the new categories. Yeah, you could say double hatched. Yeah. Yeah, that's you could say double hatched. That, as long as it's actually double hatched, Like, if I go to the Tor outlook, I could say in the first hatched area, that's where we have the potential for EF2 tornadoes, and in the second hatched area that you see with the dashed or the solid diagonal lines, that's where hatched 2 is, and we have the potential for EF3 tornadoes there. 60% wind risks will be more likely with this categorical system than with last year's categorical system. So yes, they are more common, although we still haven't seen it. They will be more common. 30% wind, 45% wind, 60% wind, those are all going to be way more common now than what they were with the old system. We haven't seen a SIG 3 yet. We haven't seen a SIG 3. Hail is the only probability that won't go SIG 3. Wind and Tor can go SIG 3. And those are diamond solid lines. So, you know how your diagonal lines go like this? Imagine if it goes diagonal again this way, and it makes kind of a diamond shape across the area. That is what your SIG 3 looks like. Yeah, we will see a SIG 3 eventually. We will eventually see a SIG 3. Could be this year, could be next year, could be a few years. You don't know. Just whenever the SPC thinks it's warranted, we'll eventually see a SIG 3. I think the most likely chance for a SIG 3 would be with like an ongoing derecho for damaging winds. But SIG 3 wind is going to be pretty difficult to get to because SIG 3 wind is for 94 plus mile an hour winds is SIG 3. And then SIG 3 for Tor is EF4 or EF5 tornadoes being possible. So SIG 3 is only for the high echelon tornado outbreaks and derechos. They are very, very, very rare. They're going to be just as rare as a high risk because, well, when a SIG 3 is issued, that's going to be a high risk. Haley, it's possible, depending on what we see with our models tomorrow and what observations look like. We could see a 10% SIG 1 or a 10% SIG 2 introduced down here in Kansas. But it just depends on how much overconvection we get. I don't think there's going to be enough confidence for a SIG 2. But I do think we could get a 10% tornado risk added somewhere across western Missouri into eastern Kansas and maybe even into northern Oklahoma. But I don't quite think there's going to be enough confidence for us to see a SIG 3. or if we will see a high risk this year. Well, I mean, it's going to be possible, but every year it's possible. But I mean, our peak tornado season is March and May this year was the expected peak tornado season from what my tornado forecast was, and from what I saw, March and May was supposed to be the worst, or rather March and April. My bad. March and April was supposed to be the worst, and then June picks up in activity. But the thing about June is not typically extraordinarily active. So an above average June doesn't mean that we'll see like as much tornado activity as April. Let me see. So the average number for tornadoes in June is roughly right around like 100, 190. Whereas the average for like April, the average for April is roughly about 200. I feel like that average for June is wrong. I don't feel like June has 190 tornadoes on average. That seems wrong. Yeah, I guess that's right. Roughly 190 tornadoes on average every June. That seems pretty dang high. I'm not going to lie. That seems quite a bit higher than I thought. So, an above average April or an above average June, it's very different. Because if June's above average, it's still not going to be as much as like what an average to above average April would be. And June is going to be probably, we'll have the high plains threats like what we did last year. We'll have the high plains threats and the low plains threats just barely east of the Rockies in like eastern New Mexico, West Texas in June, and the high plains in Nebraska, South Dakota, maybe North Dakota. But June's probably going to have like the crazy spin up tornado threats with QLCSs and derechos. And then we do have a risk for Saturday for the potential of severe weather as well. You can see here, this is day 3, Saturday. We've got a 15%. They did shift it off to the southeast. Remember, Detroit was in the slight risk on the day 4 outlook, and now the day 3 outlook is here, and they've trimmed that slight risk that used to be for Detroit. It's now pushed all the way back down to the south and is now focused in this area for Saturday. And I'm not very interested in Saturday, just a brief tornado possible. 60, 70 mile an hour winds and maybe 1 inch hail to 1.5 inch hail possible. Main threat will be damaging winds, followed by probably hail, and then the lowest threat, tornadoes. Few severe storms in northeast Ohio, 1 in northwest PA. Few severe storms, 1 actually considerable, observed 2 inch hail out here 13 minutes ago from emergency management on this storm heading into Benton, southeastern Missouri. Be away from doors and windows there. And also a tour possible severe with 2 inch hail radar indicated out here in southeastern, more of central Missouri here. So be away from doors and windows there. Stay close to your safe spot because that is a tour possible severe. But yeah, here's our risk for Saturday. We're just going to have a little bit of cape overlapping with our cold front here. Cold front back out in there. And that's going to cause the risk for some damaging winds where that instability is the highest. But you can see the NAM has definitely looks like West PA, Southwest New York, Eastern Ohio. Definitely looks like this is going to be the main area for severe weather potential on Saturday. And then there is some tornado environment, so we could see a few spin-up weak, brief tornadoes. If you think a moderate risk is becoming unlikely, you're not looking at the overall pattern. You're just looking at one run and saying, oh, there's convection in front of the cold front, no moderate. A moderate is for sure still very much on the table. And like we said, the HRRR is an outlier, so I don't know why you guys are taking it very seriously. I literally broke down the overall pattern and literally told you why the HRRR could be dead wrong, both in Kansas, Missouri, and with the extra prefrontal crap vection in northern Wisconsin. I even showed you 2 other model ones that don't show all that crap vection. I think a high risk is extraordinarily unlikely. It's very, 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 very unlikely. Very unlikely. So if we just compare the 12Z and the 18Z here, like I said, the 18Z downtrended a little bit more in moisture there across western Illinois. And it doesn't have moisture going as far north, which I think has just been a bit of a problem with the HRRR. I just don't think that we're going to see that much moisture into far northern Wisconsin. I mentioned that towards the start of the stream, and now the new HRRR doesn't have those 60 dew points going as far north, but it still has 60 dew points, still into northern Wisconsin. So I still think moisture is being overdone on the northern extent and underdone in the central extent here into Iowa, western Illinois. So, yeah, again, it's just one run, and it's the HRRR. HRRR has been wrong a lot. So, yeah, we're going to stay live for a bit longer, but we'll be live a lot tomorrow. So, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button with a notification bell set to all. Share this stream with your family, friends, social media. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And consider hitting that like button as well. It helps support the channel and helps push this stream out to the YouTube algorithm. We have the NAM 3K, the HRRR, the RRFSA, the HRRR, NAM 3K, RRFSA. What is the one I'm forgetting? There's quite a few more too. Let me go over here. We also have the NSSL MPAWS. We have the NSSL RN and the NSSL RN3. So those are also your high res ones. Oh, the HRW. HRW. That's the one I'm forgetting. So yeah. I mean, if you look at your whole list of them, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 consecutive allowing models. If you want to count all of them. The main ones we use is the HRRR, NAM3K, the RRFSA. Those are the 3 main ones, but the HRW is also used frequently, as well as the NSSL models. No, Cactus, we just don't forecast using simulated reflectivity. Let me see. No tornado out here, but there's definitely some large hail all around that area. A bunch of lightning to your north and east. And this storm here dropped 2-inch hail in that town 19 minutes ago. So there's been a lot of thunderstorms. There is the risk for a brief tornado in Missouri today, but The main threat is by far large hail. Large hail is the number one issue today across the board, especially in Missouri and northern Arkansas. Yeah, like I said, a moderate's on the table tomorrow. It's very much possible, but we're just going to have to wait and see how things trend overnight. And then the biggest thing is looking at surface observations tomorrow morning and afternoon. If they pull the moderate, the most likely time for them to pull the moderate is definitely 1630Z. So this is 16Z, 30 minutes before an SPC update. So 1630Z is definitely the best opportunity for them to pull a moderate tomorrow. 4 o'clock, they could pull a last minute moderate at 4. But again, right now at this very minute, I don't see a reason for a moderate, you know? I don't really see a reason for a moderate. The environment is high end, but there's uncertainty on how much overconvection we see. And we also could be talking about a moderate potential for wind and or hail with this stuff too. So a moderate for all hazards is on the table, actually. Like, the high end tomorrow is a moderate for all hazards. What does CSU Severe have? I bet it has a moderate for hail. Whoa. It has 2 moderates. Or, it's actually not hatched, so this actually, using the old scale, wouldn't technically be a moderate. It wouldn't technically be a moderate using the old scale, but it does have moderate probabilities just because it's not significant. I don't think that actually would be moderate. But you can see it has a 45% plus risk for large hail in 2 separate areas. Oh, no, I do see a little tiny hatched area in Oklahoma. You see that? See that black line? So that actually would be a tiny little moderate there in Oklahoma on this thing. So, yeah, this is highlighting Kansas, too, and Oklahoma. And then our main risk is back up in here into northern Missouri, southern Wisconsin. I gotta say, I disagree greatly with this. The placement of this is atrocious. This is atrocious placement. This is horrible. I think your hail risk is too far south on this one. Your hail risk here is okay. Your tor risk is too far south on here. And your tor risk is too far south on here. This is a atrocious placement by CSU. CSU's never been that great, so like I've said before, if you've been on this channel before, I like CSU the most in like day 4, day 5, day 6 is when I like CSU the most. It tends to, for some reason, from what I've seen, it tends to get very inaccurate on day 3, 2, and 1. Day 1, it gets a little bit better, but like day 2 and 3, CSU is typically very inaccurate. I've seen it already multiple times this year. I've seen CSU on the day 2 outlook be completely displaced from the actual area of severe weather and greatest severe point. So I wanted to show you that just because, you know, some of you guys do like CSU. What about NSSL? That is okay, but nothing beats the SPC. Nothing beats the SPC. The SPC looks at all these things, averages it together, gives you a very good forecast. This is just absurd. This has a giant, am I wrong, or is that a giant moderate? That's a giant moderate on NSSL. This whole dark reddish color here is moderate. So that has a huge moderate from northern Oklahoma all the way to southern Wisconsin. So the SPC looks at these things, averages it together, compares it with the model runs, and then looks at surface analysis, looks at ensembles and all sorts of other things, talks with local WFOs, and then they finally put out their forecasts. And that's why the SPC is the best. Not to mention their decades of experience. Whereas some of these things, like NSSL and CSU, haven't been in effect, but for probably, NSSL, I don't know how long. I think this has been in effect for like 3-4 years. This outlook. And then CSU, I don't know how far back CSU goes. I don't really know about that. We should have gotten SPC outlook here for today. That's why I stayed live just past the top of the hour. Here's a new outlook. So like I said, large hail, upwards of 2.5, 2.75 inches in diameter possible across Arkansas, southern Missouri. Conditional large hail, upwards of 2.5 inches in diameter in Texas. And then a few hailstones of 1 inch to 1.5 inches in diameter possible in New York. Damaging winds up to 70 miles per hour possible in those two yellow areas. Upwards of 60 miles per hour possible in that brown area. Still kept the 5% tour, which, to be honest, I am a little bit surprised about. Brief tornado possible there in that green area, and then a brief tornado or two possible in that green and brown area in New York. Pretty surprised by that 5% still being maintained. Take a look at the new 18ZH-RRR. These prefrontals could produce a brief tornado, 1.5 inch hail, 60 to 70 mile an hour winds, but today downtrended very rapidly. Remember yesterday's run, if we go to yesterday's run, showed a potentially borderline volatile environment in New York. And then, boop, all gone. And you know why? Moisture. I wonder if it was moisture from yesterday's run. Yeah, moisture. Moisture downtrended exponentially. So you went from a good tornado threat to barely a tornado threat. So I don't expect much of a supercell threat or much of a tornado threat in New York. Maybe one tornado or two, but not nearly as big of a tornado threat for today as what I thought yesterday. Like I said, about a high risk, it's extraordinarily unlikely. We're still talking about the potential for a moderate, and tomorrow's by no means is a guaranteed moderate. So, again, whether it stays moderate, or rather, my bad, whether it stays enhanced or goes moderate, doesn't change the fact about the chance for significant severe weather tomorrow. Again, Mother Nature doesn't listen to the outlines of the Storm Prediction Center. So don't get too focused on that. I know some people did yesterday, and especially, or not, I keep thinking yesterday was Tuesday. Goodness me. I know people got focused on them not issuing that moderate risk for Tuesday, 2 days ago. And people started, fussing at the SPC, and some even started thinking it was going to underperform. So don't get too focused on the contour outlines of the SPC, because Mother Nature doesn't listen to them. Although the SPC tends to do a pretty dang fantastic job with their outlooks. Just for an instance, let's just go back to Tuesday, April 14th, verification of Tuesday's risk. Nailed it. Absolute nailed the enhanced risk area here for Tuesday's risk and the slight risk in the New England states. The enhanced in Oklahoma, yeah, we don't talk about that. Oklahoma hasn't been doing very well with their performance of severe weather. It's looked good on models, but then when it actually comes time for storms to fire, they just don't end up being significant. For instance, same thing happened down here too. This is Monday. Nothing happened in that slight risk. Maybe a little bit on the southwest side of that slight risk. And then you could see the awful verification here. Ouch, in Missouri. And then they finally did upgrade that to a slight risk as storms were beginning to exit Kansas City. And then you can see, again, the awesome verification of the enhanced risk back up here. Nailed it with that too. So the SPC does very, very good. They're very, very good at what they do. Every now and then you're going to mess up because Mother Nature, they're literally trying to predict the unpredictable. So yes, every now and then they're going to screw up. That's bound to happen when you're trying to predict something that is unpredictable. And they've gotten very, very good at it, especially over the last few years. I did see the strong tour through Clinton yesterday. I tweeted about that in Missouri, and I also tweeted about the unwarned strong tour yesterday in Arkansas. We probably had a borderline tornado outbreak yesterday with the amount of QLCS spam we saw and the two or three strong tours we had. So as Caleb tunes in, that is going to be it for me. I unfortunately have quite the bit to do today, so I'm not going to be able to stay live as long as I was hoping to be live. So make sure you subscribe with the notification bell set to all. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. We will be live for multiple hours tomorrow. So if you want to, you can tune into tomorrow's live stream, as we'll be live for a very, very long time tomorrow. Assuming that things don't completely downtrend overnight, there is a slim chance that, over convection could win tomorrow and we don't see a very significant threat for severe weather. But regardless of over convection, I really think tomorrow is going to be a huge wind day and a giant hail day and still a tornado threat. Just depends on that over convection on if we actually see an intense tornado threat tomorrow, especially up there in Wisconsin into northwest Illinois and eastern Iowa. Also, don't forget to hit that like button on your way out and share this channel with your family, friends, social media. I greatly appreciate the support on the channel recently with these severe weather outbreaks, and I've had a great time tracking it with you guys. And hopefully we'll be able to track it for a few hours tomorrow as well. And hopefully everybody will stay safe during that. This will likely end up being a major severe weather outbreak. Probably one of our bigger outbreaks of the year for severe weather. Don't know about tornadoes, but wind and hail tomorrow looks like one of the bigger outbreaks of the year. So with that being said, again, appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on your way out. Notification bell set to all. Make sure you hit that like button and share this channel with your family, friends, social media on your way out. I apologize I can't be live for longer. I want to get stuff done today so that way I can be live for a long time tomorrow with you guys. Moderate is still on the is still possible and on the table, Caleb. But yeah, either high-end enhanced or low-end moderate. We'll see. Stay safe, watch the severe weather, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's live stream. Have a great rest of your day and night. Goodbye. Stay safe, watch the severe weather. Thank you, mods, for mod chat, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day and night. Goodbye.